Regular meeting of the City of Troy Planning Commission. Copies of the agenda for tonight's meeting are available at the entrance to the room. Agendas and minutes of prior meetings available on the city website. The meeting tonight will be conducted in accordance with the agenda as presented or amended by the Planning Commission.
State law establishes planning commissions. This planning commission is comprised of 9 residents appointed to serve our community. Members are appointed by the mayor and confirmed by City Council. Other individuals participating in the meeting include representatives of the city's planning department, city attorney's office, and the city's planning consultant, Carlisle Wortman Associates, is not here tonight.
If you wish to address the Planning Commission, please come forward to the lectern when recognized and clearly print your name and address on the sign-in sheet. Please begin your remarks by stating your name for the benefit of the commissioners. All remarks are to be addressed to the Planning Commission and not to anyone else in the room. If you have a cell phone or any other device that might disrupt the meeting, please either silence it or turn it off. At this time, I'll ask the Planning Commission Recording Secretary, Kathy Zarnicki, to conduct the roll call.
Mr. Buechner?
Here.
Mr. Faison?
Here.
Mr. Hudson?
Here.
Mr. Krent?
Here.
Mr. Lambert?
Here.
Ms. Malala-Holly? Here. Ms. Barakis?
Here.
Mr. Rahman?
Here.
Mr. Jacob?
Here.
One present, Mr.
Right.
Chair.
We're all here tonight. Next is the approval of the agenda. There was one of the members of the commission like to move to approve the agenda that's been presented. Mr. Faison moves it and Mr. Krent seconds it. Any discussion? We're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly? Yes. Ms. Barakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next is approval of the minutes from the September 27th meeting. Would someone like to move to approve those minutes or make a correction? Mr. Buechner moves it. Is there a second? Mr. Rahman seconds it. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, we're ready for the roll call.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Mr. Krent?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly? Yes. Ms. Barakis?
Yes.
Mr. Rahman?
Yes.
Mr. Jacob?
Yes.
Mr. Buechner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is public comment for items not on the agenda tonight. Is there anyone here that would like to address an item that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing none, then we will move on to next item on the agenda, which is a preliminary site plan review, SP JPLN 2022-0021, proposed forum flats, 200-unit residential development on the south side of Kurtz, west of Livernois, the address being 295 Kurtz, and it's PIN 88-28-28-252-016, Section 28, currently zoned BB, which is the Big Beaver District. And Mr. Savinet will be handling the presentation in the absence of Mr. Carlisle.
That's correct, and I should note that a couple things. The petitioner's architect provided me with a PowerPoint that he's asked to present following this, and the city's traffic consultant, Steve Deering from OHM, is here, and the petitioner's traffic consultant from Fleiss and Vanderbrink is here. So they're experts on traffic, and including parking. So if there's any detailed discussion regarding parking that we want to get into, the experts are here to assist us and participate. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the subject property is located on Kurtz Boulevard. It's a little over 6 acres in size. There's a 102,000 square foot building, a 3-story building that's presently on the site. And you can see on the screen, there is a lot of parking on that site. The zoning is Big Beaver zoning district. To the north and to the east, the zoning is also Big Beaver, and the use is our office. To the east, the zoning is multifamily residential, and that's also the use is multifamily residential. To the south, the zoning is about 50% industrial IB, and the 50% it's RT 2-family residential, but a lot of those homes are not duplex or single family, just for the record. So the site plan, you see to the north is Kurtz. What the applicant is proposing is to convert that large building that fronts on Kurtz to apartments, 90 units total, and you can see a breakdown there, 12 studio, 54 one-bedroom, and 24 two-bedroom. And then in that large asphalt space to the south, they proposed 2 four-story buildings. They're basically essentially replicas of each other. Each of the 2 buildings is to have 11 studios, 32 one-bedrooms, and 12 two-bedrooms, so 55 total. So when you add it up, 90 plus 100, 55 and 55, you get 200 total units on the site, where once stood a 102,900 square foot office building. So the conversion, again, 90 total units. The Big Beaver zoning district requires transparency. They're proposing 54% transparency on the north side and 44% on the south side. But it's a little bit different from a commercial or an office building where the transparency, the windows are not covered. Generally, they're never covered. With residential, there's a strong likelihood there's going to be covered with drapes and whatnot. So it's a provision that's a little more difficult to deal with in residential because of the fact that people want privacy at night. So, but it does comply. So these are the new buildings, again, south of the existing office building. These are to be 4 stories, and I should note that they are proposing carports on the east, west, and south sides of the building, so basically along the east, west, and south property lines, and there's landscape strips between the covered parking and the abutting properties. But they're relatively lengthy buildings on all 3 sides. The covered parking I'm talking about. In terms of building materials, the existing building is going to get paint and new windows, and the 2 new buildings are going to be constructed with quality materials such as hardy board, wood plank cladding, and stone. There's very, very minimal ephes panels in there as well, but pretty nice looking buildings in my opinion. So in terms of landscaping and amenities, you saw the aerial photograph. There's barely a blade of grass on this site now. There's some, but not much. Really lacks amenities. So what they're proposing, I got my pointer here. Again, here's Crooks. They're proposing a pool and patio area here. Proposing a central open space area here with some amenities such as a dog park, some benches, and et cetera. And then over here, another open space area. This is where they're proposing underground stormwater detention. Again, this is close to Crooks, east of the building. But they're proposing an open space amenity area. And there's some photographs, or some renderings, I should say, in the packet that illustrate what they plan to do there. And here's a 3D color rendering of the pool patio area. This is the central feature here. Again, with benches and other amenities to make it comfortable to spend time in. Well, then this is the area east of the existing building. I must say that the architect, Jason Krieger, does a really good job with his 3D color renderings. Really tell a nice story. So in terms of traffic, and again, I'm not the expert. We've got experts here that we can really have good conversation with. But the multifamily use is expected to generate less traffic than the existing office building would generate if it was fully occupied. And in terms of parking, if you apply the standards of the zoning ordinance based on the unit types, which is studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom, by ordinance, they require 366 parking spaces. Now, you're all aware that the zoning ordinance does allow for administrative reductions in parking, provided that the applicant submits a parking study that justifies it, and further provided that our consultant and finally the Planning Commission agrees with the justification. They're providing 308 spaces of the 366 required. So let's break down those 308 that they're providing. 182 spaces uncovered, 102 carport spaces, again, along the east, west, and south property lines, and then 24 in garages. Of the shortfall of 58 spaces, they are proposing 58 land bank spaces. 30 spaces would be in that central open space amenity. 28 would be in the open space area east of the existing building, over top of the underground stormwater detention chamber. And the parking study determined the anticipated peak parking demand based on ITT Parking Generation Manual, the 85th percentile rate, and Steve Deering from OHM can get into that, is 299 vehicles, and he can explain this concept. So 308 provided, 299 spaces required based on the ITE 85th percentile number. So site plan review standards. I'm not going to read all of these, but there's a list of different standards that the Planning Commission is to apply to this application, including enhancing the character of the surrounding area in relation to building and parking placement, building design being compatible with existing areas, et cetera. And so to summarize, points that the Planning Commission should consider: 1, the use of land bank parking and the potential loss of site amenities if land bank parking is constructed. 2, Planning Commission should determine whether the design standards and site plan standards have been met. 3, and the applicant's architect is here, applicant should describe how the material selection, color selection, and architectural style of the 2 new buildings complement or support the existing building. 4, the applicant should update the landscape plan to show landscaping in landscape parking areas above the underground stormwater detention prior to final site plan approval. Basically, they gave us a really nice rendering, but they need to tweak the landscape plan to show what that rendering shows, and they can do that during final site plan approval. Not a big deal from my perspective. 5, consider conditioning land bank approval on the use of grasscrete parking areas to replace turf grass. And finally, 6, provide a cut sheet of the proposed lighting fixtures prior to final site plan approval. Again, that's not a big hiccup from my standpoint. They just need to give us the details. And with that, I can answer any questions and remind you, Mr. Chairman, that Jason Krieger from Krieger-Klatt is here, and he wants to also make a presentation.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Savinet. Any questions? Mr. Hudson?
One question, Mr. Savinon, with 3 parts to it. Can you show me on a site plan or a schematic somewhere where the carports are, where the uncovered parking is, and what's Grasscrete?
I'll go backwards.
Okay.
So Grasscrete is a form of pavement, if you will. It's an alternative to traditional concrete or asphalt that is comprised of these kind of brick-like material with grass between them that's pervious. So when it rains, the rainwater goes into the ground. It functions much like grass would function, except it can support the weight of heavy vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
So it's more sustainable, and it's when rainwater hits asphalt or concrete, it hits and it flows somewhere to a catch basin, or a sheet flows off somewhere else. And with Grasscrete, it goes directly into the ground because it's pervious.
Okay.
I think this is the best 3D illustration. I think it's more easier to see than a site plan would be. So, oops, let me get my better pointer here, my green one. So again, this is the existing building here. The new buildings in the massive, what's presently an asphalt parking lot, and this is covered parking. This is covered parking, and this is covered parking. So you've got
It's covered parking?
covered. It's got a roof over it so that when it snows,
Okay.
the residents don't have to go out and scrape their cars off, which is it's like basically a carport. Did I answer all your questions? Was there?
Said uncovered parking, and I think parking.
Oh, I'm sorry, yeah, and uncovered would be here, here, here.
Show me again the covered parking up there.
Here? You see the
Okay.
white here?
That's what that is. Okay.
And it's a fairly, they're all fairly long buildings, with nothing to break them up.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Faison.
Just with the land bank parking spaces, if they were to have to become parking, does the project meet the open space requirements?
Based on a calculation provided by their engineer, it does. It meets the minimum open space because there is open space here. They're providing significantly more than what's there, but that was a question we asked, was even if the elements go away, does it still meet? And they confirmed that it does. The question we have is a philosophical one. Maybe that's not the right word. Typically, when we have land bank parking, it's off to the side and it's just kind of unimproved area that, it's just kind of there. And for this site, these are important amenities. I mean, we've had enough multifamily type developments that have gone before the Planning Commission to know that amenities are important to the Planning Commission, and the applicant understands that and has provided amenities. And I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but you're probably going to hear the applicant say that they're comfortable with this because they're never going to need the parking because it parks. So the concern is moot because they're never going to cover it up. But that's why we have the experts here, so that they could provide the Planning Commission with the rationale so that you can have a comfort level before moving forward.
Just one quick, which in text and potential special use approval. So is this a special use?
It's not a special use. So when we amended, I wanted it to be clear because I thought someone would ask me. So when we amended the zoning ordinance to address apartments in the Big Beaver zoning district, this is street type C, and we didn't amend the provision related to street type C. Street type C, it's permitted by right. We didn't change that. So this is not a special use.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Malala Holly.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Savidant, I don't know whether you have the answer for this question, but I'm still going to pose this to you. And you said multi-use structures will have less traffic going in and out. Do you know what the capacity was when this building was previously occupied to its fullest extent? How many people were actually working in the building? Do we have an idea?
No, that would have been a calculation based on trip generation numbers, and Stephen Deering from OHM could answer your question. That was taken out of the OHM memo that is in your packet, and that he can address that.
And it is based on the trip generation, right? All the data, yes.
I believe so, yes.
Okay. My last question for you is, can you explain, for the benefit of me, definitely, land bank parking one more time?
So there's the zoning ordinance allows various ways to provide relief from parking requirements. So we've had this conversation before, whereas we don't want petitioners, applicants to overpark. So we don't want to provide sites that have way too much parking that's never used. That's not good for the environment, the heat island effect, et cetera. So that's a problem. But we don't want sites underparked because when they're underparked, they park in bad places, like they trespass on other properties, et cetera. So we want it right parked. So what our ordinance does is allows different ways to provide relief. We allow shared parking. We allow reductions, administrative reductions like this, and we allow land banking. Those are just three examples. And what land banking is it's providing space for the parking spaces, but not actually developing the parking spaces until there's a demonstrated need for the spaces. So if this were to be approved as submitted, no changes, just as is, there would be 308 spaces provided that you can park on once it's, and there'd be room for 58 other spaces. And if we got complaints, if we got complaints, there's, the office building next door said, every night there's 12 cars parked in my lot. And every night I watch them, they drive over and they park, and in the morning people walk from the apartment, they get in the cars, these 12 cars, and they leave the site. So now we have evidence that there's a shortfall. They've got 12 cars too many on the site. So we could require, as part of the land banking provisions, require the owner to construct 12 additional parking spaces to accommodate those cars that aren't being parked on the site, because the space is there. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for that clear explanation.
Yes, Mr. Rahman.
On the south side of the building, right on Carps, there's,
North side.
on the north side, sorry, yes, on north side. I was there just walking on that lawn, big, quite a big of space. So have we considered that, or is it something that can be used for a few more cars?
Oh, for parking? It wasn't proposed. Given the height of the building, I believe they could parking in front of the building, but it wasn't proposed. So in theory, there could be some cars parked in front of the
A
building.
lot of space, because it's a long building, and then the other thing is, if not, then something else can be done in that area, because it's just kind of unused. And when it looks nice, but then it can be done nicely so that it's more useful rather than just an open space. So that could take care of the parking issue.
Well, I don't know if, I mean, the applicant's civil engineers here, maybe they looked at it, they know how many spaces they could. I don't know.
I like to know from them also, you know, so
My guess is they haven't looked at it. And again, I believe, I'm looking into my crystal ball, that their experts are going to stand here this evening and say that they're never.
thanks.
Any other questions for Mr. Evident? I just had one, and it might be Mr. Deering has to answer the question, but in the letter from OHM to Mr. Hootery, there was a remark about that there should be pedestrian connectivity across the south side of the development. Is that something that should be included in the resolution, or would that be done in the final site plan approval?
That was my error for not including it. That's I agree with it. That's something we can add during final. That's a very minute detail, although important, a minute detail that we can pick up during final.
Okay, great.
But I should have incorporated in my presentation. Good catch.
Thanks. If you have no more questions for Mr. Savinant, we'll invite the petitioners to come up, and you can do a joint presentation with your traffic engineer as well, so or invite them up whenever it's appropriate.
Jason, here's the.
Oh, yeah, great, thank you.
Yeah. Make sure you introduce yourself and sign in on the sheet as well. So.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask another question?
Sure, go ahead.
Before-
While he's signing in, go ahead.
Brett, just a question for you on the site plan. I know today there's 2 entry and exit points, and in the proposed plan, there's only 1. And is that driven by that there'll be less activity on this site than when the office building was there in full?
I think in part, and Mr. Krieger can speak more intelligently than I can about this, but basically, all of the units are going to be suppressed, fire internal sprinklers. So the fire department was okay with reducing it from 2 entrances down to 1 because 1, emergency vehicles are able to maneuver the site, so it passes all the turning radius tests. 2, there's suppression in all the buildings. So they were comfortable with that. However, where the building's not going to be suppressed, that second entry exit point would be required. How did I do?
Good, you forgot one thing.
Okay.
Also in the fire code, if you have 200 units or less, you're allowed to only have 1 entrance or exit onto the site. If we had 201, we'd have to have 2. That wasn't a reason for it, it just sort of happened to be that way, so.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Brett.
Good introduction. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
exactly. So, my name is Jason Krieger with Krieger-Clad Architects. It's 2120 East 11 Mile, Royal Oak. With me, I have Mike and Jack Parks from Cypress Partners. They are the developers. Julie Kroll, traffic consultant, and then Jim Butler is our civil engineer, and they're all in the audience here. And I figured I would run through a brief presentation for everybody, and then I'm thinking maybe we'll open up for questions, and we'll just call people up as we need to.
Sounds good.
So as always, Brent did a great job doing his presentation. So a lot of this upfront stuff is redundant, so I'll just kind of gloss over it. I don't want to waste anybody's time. I think we all know where the project site is. Brent mentioned that, surrounded by parking. I just want to take a step back and just say that we started this project it was last year, probably the fall of last year. My job file is 2021. And this was the first time that our office was engaged to modify an office building that was constructed in the 80s. You see it a lot in Detroit, things like that. And since then, we're now working on 3 projects in different communities of similar nature. So I think we're seeing a trend, obviously based on the world today. So for us, I think this is the first one of its kind in the city of Troy. So we're really excited about this, and we really want to hit a home run. And so do the developers. And we couldn't have the freedom that we have unless you had a development team and group who wants to do that. So the idea here is a Class A product. So a lot of the proposals that you see here is because of that. The one topic that I know we're going to have a conversation on tonight is the parking. And so when we first looked at this, we wanted to make sure that we did not have to go for any variances. We actually designed the site where it parked. Met every ordinance, checked every single box. And when we looked at it, we said, A, it's overparked. In general, what we see across all of the communities, even in other states that we do multifamily projects in, the rule of thumb is 1.5. That's what you see. We're doing some that's 1.3, and in a denser community, which wouldn't fit here, it's 0.75. So in our experience and in the developer's experience with our traffic consultant, and then they also have an operator on board who manages thousands of properties in the area, everyone agreed that 1.5 is really the sweet spot. And I think we're actually at 1.54. And so also what happens typically is you can land bank that parking. So that's one of our proposals. So if there is an issue, we have the ability of capturing that space to park it. So that's really, I think, the crux of it. But sincerely, we know through experience and our belief and through the science from our traffic consultant, we think that that's really the right spot. We have an example. We have the drawing of what we had before. If you guys are ever curious, I just have it in the back as an appendices. I didn't want to bring it up, but you can see that it's a lot of asphalt. It's almost like what you have here now, only you're putting buildings in the middle of the site. Also, before we dig into this, there was a comment about using potentially the front. And, we looked at that, and there's a lot of green space, and technically people could sit out there and enjoy it. But Kurt's, it's a little speedy down there, and these are residents, and in a interesting way, we love how the building actually faces inward. And that's just a sign of the times when it was constructed. That's where the parking lot is, right? And I know that in the ordinance, and we've done other projects along Big Beaver, and you have to have front doors facing Big Beaver, and then you might have parking in the back. So what we love is that we're creating like this little pocket, this reservoir for the folks who live there where it's a little bit quieter. So they can drive into the site, we could brand it, and then when you come in, you have the activities. And they feel more comfortable using the pocket parks and the other things that we're providing. So there is reasoning behind the way everything developed the way it did. And again, we've been working on this for, like I said, since last year. So we've had numerous different concepts, and this is the one that we really think we like and we're very excited about. So that's just, I just want to give you guys a little bit of history on that, and then I'll take you through the presentation. So we have a number of still slides. We have a fly-through. It's, 30 seconds or so. We'll show you that. It might give everybody a good vision for what the site is about. Let's see. We talked about the zoning. It's in the Big Beaver District. This is the current state of things. We know that. Again, the project synopsis, 3-story building up front, 90 units, 2 4-story buildings in the back, 200 total units. We are going to have, hopefully, a ton of site amenities for these folks who live here. Anything, in the renderings you'll see, and maybe there's like a putting green, dog areas, you name it, just areas for people to sit. And based on our understanding of the ordinance, we're complying, we just included that, we're complying with everything except for this land bank parking, which we're hoping for relief on. So this is our site plan, and again, I just want to touch on a couple things. There's the existing building here. We're ringing the site along the east, the west, and the south with carports. Especially along the south, we like that because there are residents who live there, so our idea is that the carports help to block light. We are proposing plantings, we have a screen wall, so we want to make sure that we're good neighbors and we protect those folks. Over to the west, it's multifamily development, so it's a like use. We think as a transitional piece, this is perfect. Typically, you're going to see single family to multifamily to commercial. So everything just sort of seemed to really make sense in this development. Initially, we had a detention pond planned here, which so it was surface detention. And through the course of discussions with the city, we ended up turning that into more green space, and we put that underground. So it's a win-win. The detention goes underground. It's a pocket park now along the east. And if for some reason there's an issue and we need to turn that into parking, it's easier. We're not getting rid of a detention pond and then installing new underground detention. So the next slide is the fly-through, and I don't know if it's going to go automatically. You might have to hit go on that. This might be loud, I have no idea. Or not at all. All right, good. So this is just kind of, so we're looking at branding the site as you drive in. And I think this might give you a good feel for the design. You can see the carports now, I think a little bit clearer than a 2D site plan. You can see the pocket park on the east, the one between the buildings. We will connect everything on the site with walkways. The idea is that folks feel very comfortable and safe to walk the site. This is one of the 2 apartment buildings around the south. You know, we wanted a contemporary building. We have more of a residential feel here, whereas, and I can talk more about later, the existing building is definitely more commercial. We love that. We think that's exciting and cool and unique. That's our pool area. You know, we did start to bring colors and then different design elements together between the 2 buildings, like the window patterns. So there is some language between them. We would have benches, different little areas for people to sit. I said potentially a putting green or bocce ball. This pocket park here could be used for additional space for people to walk their pets and do things. And then this is just the final shot, just give me an idea of how it feels in the middle here. So again, for us, it's an inward-facing development, and we think that's actually really works well for itself. So I'm going to walk you through some of the plans, and again, I don't want to bore you, so we can answer questions if you have them. This is the ground floor of the existing building. Big picture, we turned it into a double-loaded corridor building. Okay, so apartments are on the north and on the south. We have a clubhouse planned here on the southwest. And then that'll feed into the pool area. So we're able to capture all of this for amenities where you would have offices, package deliveries, you name it. There's an existing loading dock that we're going to screen a bit, and then we're going to keep it. So all of these buildings have internal trash rooms. Okay, so whether it's a valet service, these days that's typically what people do. We do have an external trash receptacle, but it's really for bulk items. That's what that's meant for. So the trash is handled interior-wise, and then they come and then they take it away. This is just a blow-up of the pool, which I think you guys have already seen the renderings of. The next 4 slides are not this site exactly, but these are representations of what we will do within the clubhouse. So these clubhouses they're designed like hotels. High-end finishes. This is where you spend the money. You spend the money all over the place, but this is the primary spot. That's how you get people to want to lease there. That's how you set the tone for the folks who are going to move in here. Especially if we're going for a Class A tenant, we're going to have a Class A clubhouse. So what you have are common areas with lounges, seating areas. This right here has a nice little communicating stair to a gym upstairs. You have either overhead doors or nano walls that open up out to the pool area. All of these places now, there's business centers, places for people to work at home comfortably. And then, of course, mail and package. That's huge these days. And this is a typical upper floor. So again, double loaded corridor. The thing that's really, really neat about this building that you just don't find anywhere right now is it was built as an office building. So when you walk in, there's a 2-story lobby with a beautiful staircase going upstairs. We're going to keep all that. We're going to use it and freshen it up and make it really cool. These are renderings of the units themselves. So I guess it'll be easier on the next slide to show you. But the building currently has really thin ribbon windows that go all around the building. They're very high. So what we're doing is we're going to cut in the, there we go. In the living room, we're going to cut them down to the floor, and then we're going to have operable windows, and then we're going to leave them high in the bedrooms. So what that starts to do is give a really nice pattern along the facade of the building, and it also gives us operable windows, and we think it'll just make a great space in there. The other thing that's really unique about the existing building is that we think we can get 9.5 to almost 10-foot ceilings, which again, it's unheard of in this area, but it's because it was built as a commercial building. And once we run our ductwork and everything else, we'll have a ton of room in there. So this right here is just elevation. This is on the south, looking north. And you can see the different window patterns cutting in. The existing building is EFS. And we understand that in the ordinance that's frowned upon, but it's in great shape. The whole building is in great shape. Kelly Services really took care of it. So our thought would be to paint it in ways that it matches the new buildings. Underneath the soffits under here, you can probably see in some of the renderings, we're going to do some wood soffits, or the faux wood soffits that will match the apartment buildings. We have some other elements like that that are meant to tie the two different buildings together, but we love the idea that this is unique, and we want it to be like that. And we still have a ton of glass, and it's going to be a special building when it's all done. Different elevations. This is along Kurtz. And then this right here, it's a little hard to see because of the projector, but different paint colors, black windows. What we don't have shown, but underneath here we have proposed, maybe on the next one. Yeah, it's hard to see, but we're going to introduce some different soffit material that then ties into the apartments. And then we're going to look at doing some special things up front. So when people come in, it's not just a pavement type experience, but maybe there's some little public art, freshen up the landscaping, et cetera. We're going to look at branding the site along Kurtz with some signage. So these are the these are the floor plans for the buildings on the south. Double loaded corridor, we have the internal garages on either side. Same thing as you go up. These are representative of what the units will look like on the inside. So you would have an upgraded looking kitchen with some nice cabinets, quartz countertops. The bathroom, same thing, would be really nice. So we're going for a high-end tenant. And then these are the 2D elevations, and we have, so this right here is a faux wood material, James Hardy siding, the same type of windows we're doing on the north building. And then cast stone down along the bottom. And then here's some still renderings. The photometric plan, you can't really read it, but it complies, so we included it just so we can mention it. And then we looked at sight lines and distances from the neighbors. So we are going to have trees planted, 15, 20 feet tall. We do have the carports. We do have a 6-foot screen wall. And so, it's likely they'll see the top of the building. However, we're going to screen them as much as we can. And they're 128, almost 129 feet away from the building. But we are complying with our setbacks. And then we'll wrap up here just with some still renderings of the site, which you guys have already seen this. So that's the presentation in a nutshell. I think we're available for questions.
Thank you.
Yep.
I know Mr. Rahman has a question for you.
Sure.
Yeah, when you were, by the way, nice presentation.
Oh, yeah, thanks. Yeah.
Video was really good.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if I missed it, but I'm still kind of looking at that space in front of the building, which is the, again, south side of Cartwright, north of the building. So do you have any plan to do anything? I know the parking was one of the suggestions, but I know that inside you have many amenities,
Correct.
many things that you are trying to do, but is that intentional that you don't want to touch that?
We're intending to maybe add a little bit more landscaping of that, but our goal is to keep it pretty quiet out there. That's really the intent. We don't see people wanting to sit out there and use that, and I don't know if we'd want people to. We like the idea it's a little bit cleaner, kind of untouched, and then all the action, or if it gets messy, if people hanging out, whatever, it's in there that can be cleaned up, you know what I mean? So we want that to be a little bit more pristine along Kurtz.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Yes, this time, Ms. Mulally.
Thank you. A couple questions for you.
Sure.
One, I want to know the rationale behind why your entry and out of your project is just one, and that you are choosing to close the other one. That's one thing. I know you mentioned the 200 unit. I'm very aware of that. But I just want to know the thought process that went behind it.
Sure.
My second question is, the existing building is an office building, so there is no patios or balconies. Are any being proposed for the building? Did I miss seeing it?
No.
If I have missed, then please correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I want to see if there is anything that building will provide for the residents.
Sure.
The outdoor seating area, that is.
Sure. So I'll go backwards. So we're not proposing any balconies in the existing building, but we do have operable windows, things like that. And there's a lot of structural difficulties to do that, to be honest. But we do have the outdoor pool area and seating area, and then the other amenities around the site. So we thought that would take care of that. The one entrance, frankly, was because we wanted to provide more green space. And to have the drive cut through there would bifurcate that and make it, I don't want to say unusable, but you would have just slivers of land on either side. And it complies. We meet all of the turning radiuses for the fire trucks. It went through fire for their approval. So we feel like we comply, it's safe. And we thought that it was just, honestly, it was better to have the green space for the residents. And to green that area up, I think it would benefit not only the residents, but the city and those who are driving by. So I hope I'm answering your question.
No, I just wanted to know the rationale behind it. I'm
That
never
was it.
for less green space. I'm always for more green
Yeah.
space. So
Yep.
trust me, I like the fact that you have a pocket park there that will, that as you said, could be used as a dog park. But I was just curious. I don't know the current capacity of the office building that sits when it was in its full.
Right.
I don't know how many cars were going in because the parking lot is so huge.
Right.
So I don't know whether all that space was also being used when the office building was in its full capacity.
I don't know.
But to think about just one entrance for all the 200 residents with 1.5 spaces, two-bedroom houses with potentially 2 cars there, I just wanted to know, will one entry suffice all the residents in the 200-unit area?
So, maybe Julie can chime in, but I'll say this. Residential is it's a much lower impact. You don't have everybody leaving right at 5. Some people might leave at different times. Some people might work at home. And I'm thinking through other projects we've done, maybe not 200, but we've done some projects where there are 130, 140. I'm just trying to go through the Rolodex of jobs in my brain. And there's one entrance in and out of the garage. And it's usually a garage or podium or something like that. So personally, I don't think 2 would be required, and everything that we've seen shows that it works, it functions, it's safe. So that's, we looked at it, and if we thought we'd need 2, then we would have probably. Now, picture an office building, back to your point, with, I don't know how many cars are back there, 300 or 400, whatever was parked before, everyone leaving at 5, you'd need 2. You know what I mean? For sure, so, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Hudson.
The building in which you're having the interior garages, are there units equal to the number of garages, or will these be an extra charge for whoever wants a garage?
I believe there'd be an extra charge? Extra charge, yes.
I'm sorry?
There would be an extra charge for whomever wants to
More
rent
units
it.
than garages available.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Mr. Krieger? Yes, Mr. Biegner.
My first question is, did you reach out to the neighbors?
think we did, yep, yep.
And you heard back from them, and things are good?
They never responded. We sent letters to all the single family homes.
Come up to the mic if you're going to talk, so we can make sure it's recorded, so. Thank you.
I guess I should sign in, eh?
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
My name is Mike Parks with the development firm. We did, Mr. Biegner, reach out to the single-family residences. There's about 4.5 behind us. We reached out to all 5 and sent letters and explained the project and did not hear back from anybody.
Cool, thank you. I had a couple other questions. One of my questions was going to be the screening and the landscaping, 20 feet high, seemed quite nice to me. Can you speak about walking paths, sidewalks?
Sure.
Some ability to walk in there?
Yeah, absolutely. So between all of the pocket parks and crossing all of the drives, we do have striped paths to connect everything. And I believe there was one mentioned about the south, so we may have missed along the south, but the idea would be to connect everything on site. So I mean, I get it's not a long walk, but if you want to just take your pooch around through there, you're able to do that. And
another question, on the 2 new buildings, there's a bunch of little boxes on the roof. What are those?
Condensers.
Okay, I wasn't sure if you were going solar or not.
Yep.
I love the green space. I was in that building 20 years ago. I was
really?
in that building about a year ago.
Yeah.
I know Kelly Services. It's an eyesore right now. Way too much parking. I love the green space. I love the landscaping. I love the privacy. I'm curious what my constituents will say
Sure.
about it too, but I like where you're going with this. I'm a fan.
Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Thank you for your presentation.
Sure.
The buildings look beautiful. I think it's a huge improvement, and I love the fact that you're repurposing an existing office. So great job there. I do have some questions. Sure. In terms of the amenities in that clubhouse and the center area, is that for all 3 buildings to be
Yes.
using, even the clubhouse?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And then in terms of parking, is there going to be some sort of a parking pass system? I'm just trying to think about, so first of all, we're talking about renters, right? We're not selling these units.
Correct.
Okay. So if somebody rents a spot in their building, is it possible that they're also going to be guaranteed a carport spot that's sort of assigned to them? Or is it possible that they come home and they're parked way on a different end of the lot because the carport spots are taken?
I would think, and Mike might need to come back up, but I would think that it would be, if you rent, I think it's first come, first serve for the surface parking spots, but you're going to rent a spot inside the garages, correct?
Yes, the carports would be rented specifically as well as the garages.
Okay, so you can't just park in the carport spot?
Correct.
You'd rent one and then you'd have a specific one,
Correct.
which would be close presumably to their unit?
Correct.
Okay. The building along Kurtz, it seems like there's 90 units if I'm remembering, and it just doesn't seem like there's close covered parking to them unless those 90 units are parking on those sides and the other 2 buildings are parking along the back. Is that how you guys are envisioning it?
Yes, that would make the most sense when we do it. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, okay. Okay, so let me go through a couple more questions. I was impressed to hear you say that the trees in the back are going to be 15 to 20 feet when you plant them, or that's what they're going to grow to?
No, we're going to plant them tall.
Okay, that's great. That sounds great. And then can you, I was over there today, but I don't quite remember. When you exit, are you able to take a left onto Kurtz, or is it?
No,
You
you got to
can't.
go right, then you do a quick turn. There's a fairly quick turnaround to go back to Crooks if you needed to.
Okay, but I did come in off Livernois, and I think I could take a left directly in, but you just can't go out that way, I'm guessing. You have to go right and turn around. Okay. So if everyone coming out is going to be turning right, then you don't even need a center lane, really. I'm just trying to think of the congestion. I have the same concerns as Ms. Malahali in terms of putting, you're kind of maximizing that 200 units to one entrance, and I'm just trying to think of the flow there.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I guess you're right. If everyone's turning right,
Makes it a little bit easier.
exactly. Yep. Correct.
Okay. Okay, that answers that. Okay. So I guess we'll talk about parking now, because it is still a concern for me.
Sure.
One of the questions I have is, how are you coming up with your calculation of open space or green space without the land banking?
Well, we were using the grass, or the open space that's along Kurtz as well.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So the green space in front of the building, and then what else? Because if we're not using the land banking, you can't use that east side and you can't use the center. So how are you complying?
Oops. So this was the plan that we had initially, and this is how this parked per the ordinance. That's how we came up with it, and the green space was everything up along here. I believe there's some along the sides, but we weren't counting things like islands and things like that. So, and I didn't bring the exact thing we used to park it, but this is what we had, and we said this doesn't really work. Plus we don't need that much parking.
Okay, I mean, I agree, this is
Yeah.
a worse
I just wanted to show you that we looked at it, that's all.
Right,
Yeah.
right, no, and I appreciate it because
Yeah.
it makes your project look a lot more appealing. But I'm just not sure, I mean, without seeing a calculation, I don't know that we're satisfying the open space requirement because we haven't seen a calculation. So
Our office worked with staff through that, right, Brent?
Yeah, I just don't have the number in front of me. I could, maybe Jim could look for it.
I mean, that would be something we'd have to have before we could approve it. I mean, that's part of the ordinance that we'd have to know. And then the other concern, sort of, I guess, philosophically, is there's a requirement that we have for parking, and I understand the use of land banking. I think it's a great idea. We don't want to overpark, but I think that they're two completely separate issues, and we can't sort of bundle them into one. There's a requirement for open space that has nothing to do with the land banked area. We have to satisfy that. And then the other issue is the parking, whether you're satisfying, you can't use that land banked area to satisfy your open space requirement is what I'm.
We don't need to, though, that's the thing. This complies with the open space.
Okay, well, I'd have to see those numbers. Just the green space in front of the Kurtz doesn't feel like it's satisfying what I think is the open space requirement.
Do we have something that shows that?
We don't have
Yeah.
Good evening, Jim Beller with PEA Group. A calculation for the green space, obviously we're using the frontage along Kurtz. That's a portion of it. And then all the other areas on this site that are green are included in that.
Such as which ones?
Well, along the east and west side and south side, we do have a green spaced area that counts towards the green space calculation.
Behind the carports?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, that's kind of questionable. I mean, we'd have to talk about that, yeah.
We've
Yeah,
done the calculation.
I should note that, that for most zoning districts, the open space requirement's 20%. For Form-Based C and Big Beaver District, it's 15%, so it's actually 5% less. So the standard for open space is, because what we're trying to achieve with Big Beaver District is more urbanism and, more that type of, less open space, I guess, is a way to put it. So the standard is actually 5% lower here than it is in other districts.
Okay. And then talking about the parking also, I feel like the type of housing this is going to attract are not families per se, but more either, I love the idea that all three buildings have elevators. That's great for seniors. Seniors could use this, but also single people. So nowhere in the traffic or parking study did they even mention visitor parking. So to me, that's a huge area that wasn't even touched upon, and I would imagine that many single people have significant others, have friends, have people visiting them, And so being parked, I think the number was 97%, it didn't even account for visitors. So that's concerning to me.
Let's bring our parking expert up.
Please.
Julie Kroll, Fleece and Vandenbrank. So the parking calculations that were used are based on ITE, which is the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking generation. The parking generation is based on nationwide data, and for this case, we looked at 85th percentile. So not the average rates, but the 85th percentile of the national rates for similar type projects throughout the country. So this is on the higher end of for all of these across the country and calculated how many people were parked at these certain times a day. And that encompasses people that live there, people that visit, people that are dropping off. Whenever they captured that data, that was captured. So all of your concerns about visitors, whoever is actually using these sites, that was included in the parking calculations. So it's not like an ordinance calc where it's separated out, where it says visitors must be this many, this. This is different. This is actually parking generation by actual land uses. So it encompassed everybody that used the site.
When you say that it's compared to other communities that are similar, I would say that Troy is unique in that, unlike other suburban, urban spaces, we don't have I don't want to say we don't have realistic public transportation, but it's not like some other cities, I would say.
So ITE does account for that. So there's a couple of different tiers. This would be what we considered suburban, not near transit. So they have other categories where near transit, on a transit route, this is suburban, not near transit. So that's what we used, and we used the higher percentile. So not the average rate, but the 85th percentile. And that was to provide an extra buffer. It's like, okay, we're not an average, we're above where we might think, just to give us a little bit more comfort level that these parking calcs would be applicable for the site. Okay, and did they also take into account income levels of renters in terms of, it could vary drastically based on the type of housing and whether or not people can afford cars or not as well? So again, suburban location, meaning they're going to be car-oriented. I'm going to pull up, if you give me 1 second, I'm going to pull up the ITE data, and it usually says where the counts were from. So in this case, they were taken in California, Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Illinois, Indiana, Maine, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, Oregon, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Washington State. Okay, I mean, it doesn't answer the question really, but. That's because I don't have an actual, specific answer, but that's another reason why we went with the 85th percentile, because it gives us that extra buffer, as opposed to normally when we do this, we use average. So in this case, we went with the 85th percentile. Okay, thank you.
Since we have the applicants, don't leave yet. Since we have the applicant's traffic consultant here, does anyone have questions for Mr. Rahman?
The question is, I understand the overall requirement that you met that, but I don't think we have the answers for Ms. Parker's questions. How about the visitors parking? So my question is also that, is there any location, any site where the parking slots will be allocated for visitors, or is it going to be how visitors is going to park their car where?
Sorry. Visitors would just park in an available spot on site.
So that means each apartment will not have any assigned parking?
Correct.
So
Well, only assigned if you rent a garage or a carport space.
okay, and how many of them will be rented?
Hopefully all of them.
So then that will be, so if all of them are rented already, then they're all assigned, right?
Correct.
Then when the new visitors coming, then what they're going to do?
So then they would be, I don't have the number, let's see here, uncovered, there's 182 spaces on site. Carport's 102, garages are 24. So out of the 182 spaces, there would be either residents or visitors.
So what I'm understanding is not how many we have, I don't remember exactly the number. We are trying to have X amount and then we have 58 less, right? That's the current situation.
You're correct, yep.
Right. And then there will be, some of them will be already rented, right? So there will be already, no one can park there. If you are renting a parking spot there, no one can park.
Correct. Yep.
So if all of them are rented already, because that's what our expectation, because, you know, then there is no space for visitors.
Well, we're not renting the surface.
That's what I was asking.
Correct, yeah, the only thing rented would be the carports, so around the perimeter, and then under the buildings.
Okay.
That's it.
So the,
Oh, I see where you're going. Yeah, no, we're not like it's all rented, you can't park. Yeah,
okay, no, that's what I was asking.
Yeah, gotcha.
All the spots will not be rented, right?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes,
Yeah, that's
correct, yep. Okay,
Thank
gotcha, yeah.
Yes, Mr. Hudson.
I'm still a little confused on this parking. If we're taking out of the calculations the covered parking in the garages, you're saying that the free parking is about 108 spaces?
182.
180?
182.
Okay. So, if you've got these units all filled up, are there going to be enough spaces for every unit in the free parking? Or is there, you're banking on they all won't be filled up at one time and the visitors then can go in those spaces?
Sure.
That's the formula?
Probably a question for you. So I see where you're going. That's probably a question for you, Mike, how to handle that. I see where you're going. You're saying if not everything's rented, but you need more spaces.
No, I'm saying if everything is rented
Okay.
and they've got visitors coming in, are you going to have more visitors coming in over the rented units? Or are there nevertheless going to be some excess parking spots, even if every rental unit has got a car in it?
Oh, yeah, there'd be, again, the surface lots are extensive.
Pardon?
Yes, the surface lots, the uncovered surface lots, which are 182,
Correct.
are
182.
are available for guests, because all of the carports in the garages will be rented.
Right.
Yes, so you have 180,
This will be filled up.
and the carports will be filled, most likely.
So how many spaces have we got for the renters and guests?
Well, in total, you have, for the renters and the guests in total, what we're proposing is 308.
208.
308,
308. Okay. That makes me feel a little better.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And Julie's report shows a demand at the 85th percentile, which takes into consideration the guests as well as,
Okay.
is 299.
Thank
So
you.
that's the math.
Did you have a question on the parking, Ms. Malala? Or, okay, I'm going to have Mr. Deering come up, because I know he was getting ready to talk to us about answering parking questions, and Mr. Deering's the city's parking traffic consultant par excellence.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'd like to reaffirm some of the things that Julie had mentioned. We of course always start with the city's ordinance requirements in terms of the parking requirements. We recognize that your parking requirements have been in place in quite a number of years now. Some people might think that they're a little dated, but because we work in a large number of communities, you're still kind of in the ballpark in terms of what other communities are looking at. Although there is a trend for communities to relax their parking requirements, to ask for less parking, it's a definitive trend, but it hasn't really swept the region quite yet. So you're well within the mainstream, but that is a moving target. Second is that Julie is also correct that the ITE is based on a very large number of studies, and these studies encompass many different parts of the country in terms of demographics and weather and things like that. And it's intended to capture all of the parking demand whether it be from residents or guests. When the discussions with the developer first started, they were looking at using average rates. And it was kind of the city that pushed them into saying, no, you can't do that. Now, I've got over 40 years into this, and a lot of what I have is experience on the trip generation side, but it applies to the parking. Trip generation, same sort of thing, studies from all over the country. You accumulate all the data, and then from that data, you can derive an average. Sometimes there's permeations in the data, and maybe a fitted curve fits better than just a simple average rate. But it's intended to be an average. So literally, if you set your requirements on trip generation or parking at the average, flip a coin whether this development will have a higher or lower than average demand. And if you're really unusual, the coin in landing will actually land on its edge and you hit it exactly on. When you look at this wealth of data that's coming in from all over the country, you see that it actually describes a distribution, a so-called bell curve. And so my experience has been that I want to see a standard deviation above average so that we have a better degree of confidence that we're not going to be caught out by having more than less than the demand. And it just happens that a standard deviation above average for a normal bell curve is about the 85th percentile, which means you have an 85% chance that you'll be at or lower than that number in actuality. So that was the confidence level that we were shooting for. And one of the reasons we are shooting for that is that it's not there today. We're on our 11th trip generation manual, but I'm an old dinosaur and I can remember back. And at one point there was the 3rd trip generation manual where they wanted to try to explain why is it that some people have higher than as opposed to lower than. Was there some other factor that you can look at? And it was only in that one manual. They never kept going with it because it turned out it was just way too hard. But what they did is they said, okay, I think they had 3 different land uses that they tried it with, and one of them was residential. Maybe there's some other factors, like for example, if it's a single family house, maybe it's the number of bedrooms in the house. And they looked at that, and there seemed to be a bit of a more bedrooms, more trips, but it wasn't a very strong correlation. Then they tried household income, and that was really good. More money, more trips. More money, bigger house, more cars in the household, things like that. It showed a lot of promise, but it was also a data nightmare, an absolute data nightmare. And they gave it up. They said, we just can't do it on a national basis, trying to get this data collected. But they stuck with me, and I've been fortunate enough to work for a number of different communities. And for example, I was a city traffic engineer in Naperville, a very well-to-do community in suburban Chicago. Rochester Hills, not as affluent as Troy, but certainly on the higher end of the scale for Oakland County. And my personal experience is that, yes, if you're dealing with more affluence, it generates more trips and more cars to park. And that's all part of why we were pushing them to do the 85 percentile for parking. And we feel comfortable that meeting that, which should be adequate for guests, also beyond the people living there, plus the ability to land bank, should provide the confidence level that this development's going to be okay. And what's really interesting and nice about this is, though the land banking is encompassing one of their key amenity features, that central park with the dog park and, the furniture and all that sort of stuff. Well, that's just one of the areas that they're land banking. They're also doing the one that's adjacent to the east side of the building, which is why they are undergrounding their detention at this moment in time. So that'll be very easy to convert if needed. And if they're short, they're probably not going to be short the entirety of the ordinance requirements. And so converting just one of the two areas seems reasonable and prudent. And that's why we recognize it's kind of a big policy issue for the Planning Commission. Do you really want land banked, the potential of land banking parking being converted into the parking to also supplant the amenities for a development like this? But again, they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. They have two different areas. They logically would want to protect the amenities for the people that are going to be renting there by taking a still nice, but not necessarily essential pocket park off on the side of the building. So yeah, we were thinking about all these sorts of things. I was looking at the numbers. I was recognizing the affluence, relative affluence of Troy, and how that translates into trips and parking, and trying to make sure that in no cases was this development going to shortchange the community.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about, when you talk about the 85%, can you describe it a little bit better for me? Because I just want to make sure I understand it. In other words, what happens the 15% of the time that we don't have parking and people are parking in their neighbors' lots?
No. Again, there's many studies done all over the country. And if you plot the data, it appears as though it's a bit of a scatter. And recognizing some developments, this particular one is 200 units. There's others that are only 150. There's others might be 500. Account for all the various parking demands for all of the various sizes, and then out on a graph, you see that there's kind of an average rate, but then there's also the pluses and minuses for individual studies. And then there's an assumption that, okay, this is a multifamily, high-rise, well, medium-rise type of residential development. You're looking at that cohort of the data. And again, if you were to plot it, it kind of describes a normal curve. And you don't want to just go with average, because at that point, it's, as I said, it's a flip of the coin whether you're above or below average. An 85th percentile means that of all the studies that have already occurred, 85% of them were at or below that magic number, whatever the number is. And in this particular case, given the number of units, they were saying 299 would be, if this was part of that database, at 299 parking stalls, it would be at or better than 85% of all the other studies done. And of course, they're going a little bit above that, not many, but a couple above the 299, plus the land banking. So, you know, it's all a degree of risk-taking, what your confidence level is. And as staff to you, I'm saying that I believe that this is a reasonable risk for the community, that they'll be able to sustain themselves with what's being provided today, and they have the reserves capable of making good any shortfalls.
Yes, Mr. Biegner.
I'm a math guy. I think what you just said is you're over 85% sure that we have enough parking for what's going on here without the land bank, right?
If you're doing like a statistical confidence level type thing, we're close to at least 90% confidence level, just providing the ITE standard deviation above. And again, with the land banking, it's approaching 100, 99.9% confidence level that will be okay.
And I can't speak for the rest of my group here, but we like the green space, I guarantee it. So we'd like to keep that, I'm sure, knowing that. The parking
And
is
that's why we
I
were
think
recommending.
for us, but I'll let others speak.
And I agree with that. I like green space too, and that's why I was recommending that they land bank rather than paving today.
Yes, Mr. Savinant.
So, Mr. Chairman, great minds think alike. So, on October 6th, we had communication with Ray, who works for Career Clat, and we had a concern about, well, what if worst case scenario we have to pave all the land banking? What percentage of open space would we have on the site? And 27.66% open space. So we would still meet the open space requirement, even if worst case scenario, which I'm not suggesting would happen, but it would comply with open space.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Deering? Yes, Mr. Rahman.
So still parking related. So for this kind of 200 apartments, expectation is each apartment will have two cars, right? I'm just going on the other side. I know you're a percentile and all these things, but I'm saying that, my expectation will be there will be 2 cars for each apartment. There are 200 apartments, so that I need 400 spots. And somebody might have extra 2 cars, right? There is no regulation. Everybody can park anywhere, right? I might have like 3-4 cars, 2 park on the regular parking spot. So the question is, how can we handle those situations?
Well, your ordinance, which is on the very strict, demanding scale of things, does not say it's 2 per dwelling unit. You look at whether it's a studio or a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom. And the presumption is that, especially at the ends of the scale, if it's a studio, it's probably just 1 car.
No, that's probably, but then studios, we don't have assigned parking here, right? We have a bunch of like Walmart style parking lot and everybody can park there. You get my point. So if a studio guy has 4 cars, is there any way we can avoid him not to park in those open spots? And what will be the provision? How do we make sure that, because I feel like we don't have enough parking for 200. I mean, if you make it like 160 flats, then it's fine. Maybe we can accommodate more parking spot, if your families live there.
Well, it's getting into the same sort of conundrum of a lot of issues that relate to transportation, building roads, and things like that. Are you planning on always looking at it's always the day after Thanksgiving? You have some massive surge that doesn't reflect itself throughout. It's only maybe 3 days a year, and the rest of the 362 days are just ho-hum. I don't know that any community requires parking to that kind of extreme in terms of the assumptions of how many vehicles per apartment, regardless of the number of bedrooms. Your ordinance makes sense in terms of relating number of parking required by the size of the apartment, studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom or more. That makes sense. It's just that the national data suggests that there's many times where you can get away with less. And we're basically advising you, it's a calculated risk, but it seems reasonable. Plus you have the land banking that gets you back to the ordinance requirements. And that's the answer. If this development doesn't have enough parking, if it happens to be so affluent that everybody that, even if it's just one person, but he has his hobby car, maybe it's a 67 Barracuda, but he drives a Toyota. you know, if something like that happens, then again, you have the room to get them up to your full ordinance requirements.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Deering?
I just want to finish it. So I'm not convinced. I just want to, about the parking spot, the way you explained. So I feel like we are not going to have enough parking spot, but that's fine. So, thanks.
Mr. Savanant?
I guess a question or a comment. So 2 kids in college. I've been involved with a lot of leases in the last few years, and some of this is going to fall on management. I'm guessing for studio apartments in your lease, it's going to say you're only allowed 1 vehicle, is my guess, because I've signed leases like that. You know, there's going to be limitations on how many cars you can have. You're going to have to register your license plate and your make and model and paint color with the unit. I mean, it's in the best interest of the complex not to have car collectors, you know, with their Barracuda collection parked on site. So I want it bright parked as well, but
no, I get your point.
Yeah.
I asked that question to I'm not the applicant, that what is the technique? How are we going to, not to you, but then at that time it was open. There was no regulation. It was, oh, you can go and park anywhere. But that's not the way you will do it, because I know that this is high-end apartment, right? I will not be surprised if somebody has a motorbike, somebody has a Corvette, and then a truck and like a regular car, right? But then if there is no regulation mentioned that how we're going to accommodate these 4 and then still have visitors and others, then I have issue. Because I don't think I received that kind of clarification from the applicant.
Yeah, and we're just having a conversation where I'm all right. I think this is really, this is good. This is good. I'm thinking that, and I don't want to speak for the applicant, but please come to the podium if it's okay with the chairman. But I mean, it's gonna, if the management doesn't get a control over the parking, it's going to cost them money, a lot of money, because they're going to have to pave. And so it's in the best interest for dozens of reasons for them to really grasp the parking situation and control how many cars, because if they don't, they're going to be losing green space, losing amenities, paying tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars to pave, et cetera, et cetera. So it's incentive to really control the parking. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Yeah. This is a multi-million-dollar development when the last thing we want to do is screw it up over parking. So we have studied this extensively, and my very, very strong feeling is it's the worst thing we can do is to put that parking in now and take out this beautiful pocket park, because if for some reason, as you pointed out, we do need it, we can always do it, but don't do it now. It's the worst thing you can do for the project, because it's not as pretty, it's not as good. But we can do it, but it's not a good idea, in our opinion.
So you standing there as, may I, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
As the applicant, you are going to take this issue seriously, really look at controlling how many automobiles each unit
Very
have,
much.
et cetera, et cetera.
Very much. It would ruin our project, so that would be, it's front and center as to what we would do with it, for sure.
Okay, then it makes sense.
Any questions for Mr. Deering? Yes, Ms. Parakis.
Not for Mr. Deering. My question's
Well,
for
we'll let Mr. Deering sit down if we have no more questions, so thank you, sir.
I mean, just along what we're talking about right now, you know, we live in Michigan, it snows. It is important that you have an understanding of how it's going to work, I believe, in this phase of the process, because if people come to rent a unit and you say, oh yeah, we're sold out of carport spots, you can just have a free-for-all in the lot, you might lose customers. So the last thing we need to see then is you take the land banked place and turn it into carports because you can't lease your places because people keep telling you over and over, well, we're not going to rent from here because we're spending all this money on an awesome place, but I want a covered car spot. So I do think that it needs to be thought out well in advance. You have to have it targeted out and say every 2 bedroom is guaranteed 1 carport spot, every 1 bedroom is guaranteed 1 carport spot, and then make sure it actually adds up the numbers. Something that hasn't been mentioned yet that is an obvious way to resolve some of the parking issues without losing any of the amenities or the green space is to either lower the levels to 3 stories on your 2 new buildings, and/or convert the first floors of the 2 new buildings into entirely garages, because that will reduce units, so it will reduce your parking requirement, and of course it will add parking, garage spots, which I think will be wanted and desirable for these tenants. So, you know, that to me is a obvious thing to do at this point, when I think we're all struggling a little bit with the parking. I think that those, I mean, would you consider doing either of those 2 things?
Well, we would, for sure, with the leasing of the carports and the garages themselves is going to be a blended over all of the units. We wouldn't let anybody hoard those specific spots. I think that was the first part of your question. So that is without a question will happen inside the leasing that we'll be doing. As far as reducing the units, the project is dead on arrival for all kinds of reasons to reduce it below 200 units, mainly because of construction costs and everything that's going on in the world. It is dead on arrival. So we cannot do that, and that would be detrimental to the project.
Any more questions for the applicant?
I have a question.
Yes, Ms. Malal-Hali.
Ms. Barakis brought out the point that I was wanting to ask, and that is, what about the ground floor parking and apartments sitting right on top? In most urban locations, we do see that. I'm going to reference one area in particular, and that is Livernois and 12-mile stretch of Royal Oak. You will see some very, very new, very urban apartments that do have ground floor parking, and the apartments sitting right on top of it. In fact, the elevator access is right at the parking area. That basically will then allow more green space to happen outside, which will also add as a great amenity and tool for the residents. So I just want to know your thoughts. Have you considered that kind of an issue, and what was the reason why you would not want to do that here?
What we tried to do was provide enough of those. So we provided 24 of them inside. I think that's what you're referring to as underneath the building?
Yes.
Yeah, so we did provide, again, 24 of those. And so we tried to create the best mix and blend of under carports and also surface, because there are different rental points for all those parking spots. We tried to create, based on our history, the right blend for that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but the 24 is still not going to be the entire resident occupation of each building.
Correct, yeah, it's right.
It's going to be first come, first serve, I take it?
For those, correct. But they are more money, so it won't be, you know, we're trying to hit different price points for different people, I guess is the best way to say it.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
For the architect,
Go ahead, Mr. Krent.
Mr. Krieger. First of all, fabulous presentation. Thank you for showing so many very realistic views in your rendering. It just was very helpful.
Sure.
Second, you mentioned something about that dumpster that's not used by the, what was the use for that one?
So the dumpster, it's in the southwest corner. It's not a dumpster, it's a like large trash. So if somebody wants to throw away a box spring, something like that, they can take it out there. If they're getting IKEA boxes, it's for stuff like that. And then the management company would handle that.
Yes.
Yeah, what's it, what it's called? But yeah, that's what it's for.
Any more questions?
Just one quick question.
Let me ask one before I go to you. So, the major concern, I think it's a great project. At one time, I rented an apartment down the street on Kurtz, so this will be a nice asset to that area there on Kurtz. The concern I have is walking down Olympia the other day, and the one building, the new building you're proposing to the east, to me, it looks like that's going to really kind of be a rather high building for those people that live on Olympia to be looking at. Mm-hmm. And I know Ms. Parakis' question, she asked if both of those buildings could be reduced by 1 story and was told no because of the economics. But
sure.
Would you be willing to consider reducing that building to the east down to 3 stories? That way it's not quite so imposing to those folks on Olympia.
Sure, I don't think that's an option based on what Mr. Park said. We could look at the parapet heights and lowering that down to maybe knock 3-4 feet out of it, or at least on that side of the building, just to reduce the visual impact. The other thing to make note of is I believe that we comply with the ordinance on the heights. So we feel like we're in that realm, but absolutely we can take a look at that, because I get your point. We want to make sure we're good neighbors, so absolutely.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Ram?
Yeah. You showed that in the main building, we have community space, right?
Correct, yes.
And do you know how many people can be, having some kind of event or how big is that space?
It was,
Square feet wise?
I believe it was, I have so many jobs running around through my head here. I think it was 2,500 or 3,000. Let's see. No, and we don't have a number on it. It's probably about 3,000 square feet. I'm guessing, but that's about what you would have for this type of a building. And, these are typically what you're going to have is you're going to have probably a few lounges, maybe like a party room, maybe for, 15, 20 people if they want to rent it. You're going to have some business areas. You're going to have you're going to have a manager and assistant manager. Mail these days takes up a bunch. It's just lounge areas for people to go get away is what it really is.
Are you planning to have any gym type facilities there in the?
What's that?
Gymnasium? Gym?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there would definitely be a small gym, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any more questions for the applicants? Seeing none, I think we're done with you for right now. And there's no public hearing tonight, but we always want to hear from people who have an opinion. So if there's anyone in the audience here who would like to speak to us and give us their opinion on the project, we'd be willing to let you speak at this point in time. Did you want to come up or not? Okay, all right. Seeing no one from the audience that wishes to speak, we'll bring it back to the commission for either a resolution or further discussion. Yes, Ms. Parakis.
I have a question maybe for Mr. Savadant regarding the car port that's along the south side that runs for probably, I don't know, 175 feet or so. I'm not sure that complies with our ordinances under 5.04E. I'm not sure if it's 4 or 5 because in our packet it was just sort of excerpted, but site access and parking, where we talk about the location. It seems to me that we might have a conflict there. Have we done calculations to ensure compliance?
Yeah, I believe that provision refers to, I haven't found it here, but I believe that refers to a principal building, not an accessory carport like this one.
I'm looking at the part that says when parking is located in a side yard but fronts on the required building line, no more than 50% of the total site's linear feet along the required building line or 100 feet, whichever is less, shall be occupied by parking. It's on page, where did I find it? I think it's 18 of the agenda packet.
I'm sorry, I apologize, I'm looking for it in the ordinance.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I wish I had it. I knew where because I printed it.
Page 18.
It is 18? Okay, thanks. Yeah, I printed it at home and it's,
It's under site access and parking, and it is point B.
One second, Mr. Chairman.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, Mr. Savadon. I'm sorry. I just, I had looked at that and frankly, I wasn't exactly sure I understood how to apply that, but I haven't seen such a long carport and I questioned the safety of it and the look. And then when I saw this provision, it made me question whether or not it complied.
Mr. Zavadin, it's page 8.
I found it.
Okay.
So what this is referring to is in situations, so it's a little confusing. When it's located in a side yard behind the front building line, but fronts on the required building line. So what this is referring to is in some districts, like form-based districts like Big Beaver, there's a required build-to line, like 10 feet or 30 feet. So when it's beside the building, but fronting on that building line is what that's referring to. So this is in the side yard and not fronting on the front building line. It's south of the front building line. So this wouldn't apply. So the question becomes, is the Planning Commission okay with these lengthy carports? Now, just a couple of thoughts came to my mind. One is one of the intents of the one that's lengthiest is along the southern property line, and about 50% of that property line abuts residential, RT residential, and Mr. Krieger stated that one of the reasons that this is a benefit is it helps to screen the parking from the residential, in addition to the trees and the wall, et cetera, et cetera. I was looking at the property, the multifamily to the west, and there's a very lengthy, there's a really lengthy carport on the other side, on this property here, that's about as lengthy as these two. So the question becomes, is the Planning Commission okay? Although that provision doesn't apply, there's still compatibility in other site plan review standards. Are you okay with this length? Because it's long. It's significant.
Anyone have any other questions for Mr. Savenant, or a resolution someone wishes to propose?
Can I add one thing to the conversation?
Sure.
So I'm thinking Mr. Deering indicated, I think he's described himself as an old dinosaur. And I've been here over 20 years, so I put myself in that category as well. I consider myself an old dinosaur as well. I'm trying to think of how many land bank situations we've had where we've asked the applicant to provide parking in land banked areas. I can't think of any. But maybe that's luck, I don't know. But I don't recall of ever having to ask someone to pave. But in this scenario, if there was a parking issue, we wouldn't just say, well, we've got a complaint, pave everything. We would try to identify exactly what the shortfall is. And again, as Mr. Deering indicated, the central features got the most amenities. That's the one that we would not want to touch unless we absolutely had to. I look at here, a simple solution if there's just a relatively insignificant shortfall is maybe punch a road here and put parking on one side, on the east side, and then see how that works. And if there's still a parking problem, maybe we park on the other side of that drive. So that we would take up small bites at the apple versus just paving everything. So I think we would all want the same thing. We would want these amenities to stay and only pave them if we had to. But it's got to park. So we try to find that balance. So this is step one, is they think this works. And we heard our traffic expert, Mr. Deering, indicate he's got a very high confidence level. So from a parking standpoint, only talking about parking, there seems to be a comfort level from the professionals.
Mr. Yes, sir. Yes. I don't hardly call on you, so I lost your name for a second.
Well, I want to say a few things. Number one, it's rare that we see a project of this quality come before us. You guys have done an outstanding job. The developer, Jason, I mean, this is a very, very nice project. Based on what I've heard from two experts in the field of traffic and parking, I don't have any problem with the parking, plus the fact that we've got a safety net if we need it. I'm almost of the opinion that I wouldn't want to ever see that central area parked. I mean, I don't know what the solution is, but based on what I've heard and the level of confidence and the fact that even what Brent suggested, that using that east side as a safety net and doing it in steps, I think is a very viable and wise move. So, again, we sometimes get into areas, I think, that are a little bit beyond where we should be going. These developers are going to be spending a lot of money on this project. They certainly want to make a buck on it, I understand that, but it's a project that I think we all will be very proud of to have in this city, and I think they know their business a whole lot better than we do, and we need to at least give them the benefit of the doubt when they come before us with a project of this quality and of this caliber. So I guess all that to say that I'm very much in favor of the project, the way it's been presented, with the number of units and the number of parking and the types of parking and the fact that the carport is a long carport. I don't see a problem with that. I really don't. I mean, it's buffered on the opposite sides of the property from the other properties, and so I'm good with the project the way it's being presented. So again, I appreciate it. And thank you, guys.
Any other comments? Yes, I'll give Mr. Beekner this time.
I was going to ask Mr. Tagle to make a resolution.
I'll call on Ms. Mahali first, and then we'll let Mr. Tagle present the resolution.
Thank you. No, I had to just steal the mic for a bit to just kind of commend you on a wonderful presentation. Indeed, those kind of dimensions and angles with which you brought your presentation to us kind of gets us to understand your project and your interest in developing this area a lot better, and definitely to see a lot more green space on this slide as opposed to what exists right now. Boy, that is a good change that we want to see, absolutely. I'm not opposed to the carport. In all honesty, I'll tell you, in my days when I was living in an apartment, I cherished a carport during the winter months, and I know the residents will like to have that. That is a good amenity to have. And no, not 1 inch of that green space would I want to see converted into blacktop. If we can give this to the residents and have this in Troy, I think that will be nice. I was a little concerned about the one entryway. I still am. I'm going to kind of be a little reserved in agreeing to that, but I will take your sound judgment and the judgment of the experts presented here to probably agree with this project. So thank you once again for bringing a project, and most importantly for repurposing an existing building, which we definitely want to see happen. Thank you.
Before I call on Mr. Tagle for the resolution, yes, Ms. Barakis.
I mean, I do have another question with the, when we look at other developments and applications, I feel like we have concerns about how pedestrians are going to get to their parking spots. And here I don't see any, people are going to be coming all over the place. I see the way they cross into the green, but then that whole strip of, I don't know how many parking spots we have back there, it's just kind of a free-for-all. Someone could come out this door and be parked way down there. There's no crosswalk anywhere. There's no, I mean, the other thing we haven't talked about is how fast cars are going to be driving down that way. No speed bumps, no crosswalks. These are all open issues to me that, I'm not prepared at this time. I'm just being honest. I'm not prepared to approve it, but I still have some open questions that I feel that we haven't, another thing the ordinance requires is the primary entrance of the existing building has to be clearly identifiable and usable and located in the front. And I'm not sure that we talked about, we sort of talked about the back of the building being the primary entrance. So that would violate the ordinance. So these are all open questions for me still.
Before Mr. Tagle makes the resolution, I wanted to bring Mr. Krieger back up. I wanted to double check and see, and Mr. Savant may let us know if it has to be in the resolution or not. You said you were willing to do something as far as the height of the two new buildings so they didn't, especially the one to the east that kind of encroaches on the residential area on Olympia. What were you willing to do in that?
So with regards to that, the parapet, which is around the exterior perimeter of the building, we could look at lowering that. We still, by ordinance, have to screen the rooftop units, so we could do that internally. So that's something I think we could look at and do. I think the parapets are around 5 feet. Maybe we can make them 3 feet so that they meet fall protection, or even 1. So it's something that I want to speak with the owner about, but that's absolutely something we can take a look at. And the building to the west, I mean, you're abutting industrial,
Yes,
multifamily,
I'm not worried
that
about
kind of
that one
stuff.
as
Yeah,
much, so.
yeah, exactly. I'm just looking up there, even if we take part of the south or something like that. So I think we can do that without having to get into any crazy fall protection things up on the top of the roof.
Thank
So,
you.
Yep.
Great.
Yeah, I wrote that down, so we'll take care of that, yeah.
I just have one more thing. And overall, what Mr. Tagle said, and I like the project, no question about it. But I personally feel like parking thing is still not resolved. Like,
Sure.
because you haven't said something that this is how I'm going to manage the parking, right?
Sure.
There is no specification about the visitors parking. Initially, you told that, oh, you can go and park anywhere. Then when you said that if somebody has additional cars, then how are you going to regulate that?
Right.
I have no clear picture of how you're going to do that. So at this point of time, I feel like I'm not 100% convinced about this project. Not from a green space standpoint, I don't want any more parking spot there, but you can reduce the number of flats. That can be one way of managing the parking problem.
Right.
But then, or I have to have a clear picture from your side, not from the traffic consultant side, because they did their research with the bell curve and all these things. I get that. But then how are you going to manage that's not mentioned. And then also in the internal movement of pedestrians, not also mentioned to Ms. Parker's point. So I don't know, from city's requirement standpoint, is that something that we need to mention, or how are we going to check it? How it's going to be coming back to you that there are some issues with the parking with this nice high-end complex?
There's a very simple way. People complain. But we receive complaints.
Very primitive way of solving problem, right? Mr. Savidan? Because I know that there will be, because either they have to give you the plan, how they get one apartment will have only one designated parking spot. There will be six visitors parking spot. I have seen places like in Boston and some other areas where I visited that there are designated visitors parking spot where you go and get a ticket, put it on your car, and then they can park there. So what I'm saying is within those 308 parking spaces, they can manage it, but they didn't present it in such a way that I'm convinced. That's basically what I'm saying.
So that, again, we're just having a conversation.
Yeah.
So that level of information is not required specifically as part of site plan approval. If the planning commission felt that type of information was important, they could certainly request it. It's going to be the responsibility of the manager of this property, this apartment complex, to ensure that there's not parking space hogs or whatever, however you want to describe it. And although dealing with complaints is a primitive way of determining, shortfalls, it's very effective. We get hundreds of phone calls every week of people complaining. Trust me, if there's a shortage of parking, my email and telephone will blow up. There's 30,000 properties in the city, 30,000 plus. It's impossible for us to police every one of them, so we rely on complaints to help police. And people can come to the counter, they can email, they can call, they can go on Facebook, they can go on Nextdoor. They can send letters. There's like 10 different ways for people to contact us, and they do. And if there's a parking problem here, we'll be notified very quickly.
So my question to you, Mr. Savidan, is that something that, because we approve it and it goes away from us, right? So is there any way you can check what kind of regulation they will have in the apartment complex so that they will not have problem? And
I suppose
I'm just asking, is that something that you do? Because there are different departments, not be planning department, it could be traffic department, it could be some other department. I'm not sure about that.
Well, the owner is listening to us. He knows his business better than I do. again, there's a money argument to be made here. Anytime you can make an argument that involves money, 308 spaces has to satisfy the parking demand, or they're going to spend upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars to fix the problem. They don't want to have to do that. I mean, they've got to manage it, because if they don't, they're going to have to make changes that they don't want to make.
Mr. Seven, you know who's going to get the complaint first is him. And they're going in order to safeguard their investment, they're going to take care of it, right?
Yeah,
So
I mean, it self-regulates to a large degree, but if it would make you more comfortable, we could write that as into a lease language and provide that, during final site plan, that would show you that. So we'd be happy to do that, because
Right,
it will
exactly.
self-regulate, but be
Every
happy to.
apartment can get one parking spot, right? That way we have.
Well, we have 2 bedrooms, 1 bedrooms, and studios.
Right.
So,
There
but
could be
we'll.
some regulations so that I have designated.
Yeah,
visitors parking.
we'd be happy to do it,
And
because
obviously, I like to see some visitors parking where it will be written on the page that denotes the visitors parking.
we'd be happy to do that as far as this final site plan approval, create that language.
Okay.
So to be clear, what the applicant is offering is basically a parking plan
Yeah.
to be submitted prior to final site plan approval.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that
Yeah, no problem.
convinced me.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Tagle, are you ready for your
Well,
resolution?
I am, but I have a question for Mr. Savana. If the land bank parking is required and they put it in, do they meet the ordinance requirements for the number of parking spaces?
They would, yes.
And does our ordinance require them to tell us, or a petitioner to tell us, how he's going to park his legal number of parking spaces? Like, who's going to get what?
There's no requirement in the ordinance for that.
Okay, this is an area that I don't understand. They have the number of parking spaces that are required by
They
the
did
ordinance.
not.
Or they have presented a
They
plan.
have 308.
They presented a plan.
You just say that you don't want to reduce.
One at a time, just let Mr. Tagle talk, then you can
They
respond.
presented a plan showing 308 parking spaces with an additional land bank parking spaces that would be compliant with the ordinance. So if we approve this and they need more parking, they will have to put in or use some of or all of the land bank parking. So I just don't understand, if they comply with the ordinance, why are we making them jump through hoops to tell us who's going to get what?
No, I can respond to that.
go ahead.
Yes. So, Mr. Tagle, we just said all that we don't want to convert those to parking spots, right? I don't want to be having.
You can't have it both ways.
No, I mean, we all love this project. We all said that this project we like because of green space, right? Now you are saying that we will make those 58 green spaces into parking spot. Then you are kind of having both. So which side you want to go? You have to stick to one. Because we are giving them the credit. Let me finish. I didn't finish my conversation yet. So you just said that we will like this project. We like this project because of those 58 parking spots. We're not, because of those green space. And now we are saying that we have the provision of going back. That means you are on both, you're stepping on both boats. So I don't think that's the right way of making decision. Thank you.
Okay. All right. One last comment.
Go ahead, Mr. Tagle.
Ms. Parakis, if we added to the resolution some traffic calming and some painted pedestrian walkways across the aisles, would that help you see this project in a different light?
I appreciate that. That would definitely help, but I just don't feel like it's ready. I mean, I tend to agree with what Mr. Rahman just said in terms of, we're telling them that, to play devil's advocate, this could be a great workaround to get away with not having to provide open spaces because the green spaces, because what sold all of us on it are these beautiful green spaces, but they could be taken away if they don't satisfy the parking. And then when we ask them to provide details, it's like it wasn't even that well thought out, in my opinion, of how they were going to delegate or designate the parking, which makes me a little bit nervous that it's not well parked and we might have to dip into those spaces. So I'm not comfortable yet with that idea. I don't think for me, it's not ready. And again, I did cite a few other provisions from the zoning ordinance that are questionable, that I'm not sure that it complies. So at this point, I'm not ready. Thank you, though.
Okay.
John, when you're making your ordinance, could you include Mr. Lambert's added item for number 4?
The parapet heights.
Yeah.
Is that on all 4 sides of the building?
I'm just more concerned about the side that faces Olympia.
The east side.
Yeah.
East building, east side.
South side.
Mr. Chairman, was there another issue you raised at
There
the very
was a
outset of the
concern,
meeting?
too, that Mr. Savinant was very gracious in apologizing for, and that's we want to add a sidewalk along the south side of the
Yeah,
site.
and that memo was shared with the petitioner, the petitioner's engineer. They've got it. I just didn't mention it in my presentation.
So it doesn't need to be addressed in the
It doesn't
resolution?
hurt, but we'll address it in final. If it's your purview, if you want to specifically reference it,
Tell me
then
specifically sidewalk where, to and from where?
on the south side of the buildings, I believe, the 2 new buildings.
South side of the 2 new buildings. 5-foot walk?
Or if you want to just simply say, address concerns identified in the OHM memo.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
one more comment. I don't know if Brent, if you could comment on Ms. Paraxis' point about the front entrance?
Yeah, Ms. Parakis raises a good point. If this building were to be constructed today as new construction, it would be designed differently than this. This was approved in the 80s. It very clearly, the air quotes, front of the building is really facing the parking lot, and there's no front relationship. So it is a non-conforming building, so they can continue to use the building provided they don't increase the non-conformity. So Ms. Paraki, you're 100% correct if it was new, but because it's non-conforming, that provision doesn't apply. They're not making the relationship the non-conformity any worse. So in our opinion, it's a moot point.
Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out, asking the question, too. Mr. Tagle, are you ready? We're going to make you work hard tonight.
Resolved, the Planning Commission hereby approves a reduction in the total number of required parking spaces for the proposed Forum Flats residential development to 308, when a total of 366 spaces are required on the site based on the off-street parking space requirements for multifamily residential. This 58-space reduction is sufficient to meet the parking demands based on land bank parking provided on the site, and be it finally resolved that the preliminary site plan approval for the proposed Forum Flats 200-unit residential development, south side of Kurtz, west of Livernois, Section 28, currently zoned BB Big Beaver District, be granted, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, update the landscape plan to show landscaping in the land bank parking area above the underground stormwater detention prior to final site plan approval. Number 2, provide grasscrete parking areas to replace the turf grass in the land banked areas. Number 3, provide a cut sheet of the proposed lighting fixtures prior to final site plan approval.
Mr. Tagle, I think Mr. Savinant wants one correction for you there.
Yeah, just something to consider. So the providing the grasscrete parking suggestion was in the event that the whole thing was going to get paved. We've talked about the fact that if there are issues with parking, we're going to take small bites at the apple. I don't know if we're just going to take small bites at the apple and do this piecemeal, knowing that even if we pave all those open space areas, it's still going to be over 27% open space if we need that provision in there. That's up to the Planning Commission, but that was it's up to you. You're the maker of the motion. If you want to keep that, you certainly may, but I'm trying to give you some background in terms of where that came from.
My opinion on that, Brent, would be that if we had to use that as parking, I'd much rather see it green with the turf pavers than I would asphalt. It would. I'm sure Mr. Butler is going to design the retention for an impervious area of where the land bank is going. But in this case, if it was to remain the grasscrete or grass pavers, that would alleviate or eliminate the amount.
And I guess to bolster your point, we heard our traffic and parking expert state that he had approaching 100% confidence. So the odds are it's never going to get paved anyway. So if it does, it'll be Grasscrete.
Right, right. Yeah, I think there's a lot of advantages to staying in that way, the heat island effect and all of that. So I'd like to leave the motion the way it was originally crafted. Let's see. Number 4, on the east building, south side, lower the parapets to approximately 3 feet above the roof line. Number 5, address the concerns noted in the OHM memo.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Even though we all had discussion, any additional discussion anyone wishes to raise at this point in time?
May I
Yes.
raise a question?
Sure.
Please be patient on this one. I just want to know, in the eventuality that they have to do a piecemeal approach to increasing parking spaces, can we reserve it only to that section which currently is sitting on the, is it the east side?
Northeast.
That small pocket park? Can we just say that that would be the area that needs to be attacked first as opposed to the central area? Because that area is so crucial to the well-being of the residents with the homes facing the central courtyard. I mean, that appeal is so nice. That park is tucked away in the side as opposed to the central area. Let's not peel away here, but maybe do piecemeal approach there.
Mr. Savina, you have a comment?
No, I think it's good. Sitting here now, I would be involved in that, but there may not be a parking issue until I'm long gone, and the person who's sitting in this chair may not have that background, so that's a good point.
Is that okay for the mover and the seconder?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else we need to add in there before we proceed to a vote? All right, I guess we're ready for the vote now. Ms.
Mr.
Zarnicki?
Grant?
Yes.
Mr. Lambert?
Yes.
Ms. Malala-Holly?
Yes?
Ms. Parakis?
No.
Mr. Rahman?
No.
Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Is that yes, Mr. Tagle?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Biegner?
Yes.
Mr. Faison?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. All right. Guess we're done with that part of the agenda. Thank you for participation, and we're... Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next on the agenda is public comment for items on the agenda tonight. Does anyone from the public wish to say anything? It looks like the entire public is leaving, so I guess we don't have comments from the public here. So, next, Planning Commission comment. We'll start down with Ms. Zarnicki. Do you have any comments you'd like to share?
I have nothing.
Okay. Mr. Biegner.
Mr. Tagle, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's it.
Ms. Malala-Holly.
No comment, thanks.
Mr. Hudson.
No comment.
Mr. Faison.
Nothing from me.
Just want to mention that the Michigan Association of Planning was a wonderful event to attend. The biggest takeaways for me were street art, wonderful history on that, and what other communities are doing to promote public art. And the other item was a great background and history of trees, landscaping. Anyway, those were the two big takeaways for me, and both have to do with providing a streetscape that is really enjoyable. So it's well worth the time I spent there.
Ms. Parakis.
Yeah, I have a quick question about the special meeting next week. Is it a special meeting because of the items on the agenda or because of the date?
Because of the date, because it wasn't a regular meeting,
Oh,
we had
okay.
to find a date that worked for everybody, and it did. And can I chime in and just piggyback on so people that are listening? Those who wish to attend in person or remotely, the special meeting will be looking at two projects. One is the pavilion and ice skating rink, I guess. It's really cool. It's designed to look like a pond with an island in the middle, and it's really going to be awesome. The Planning Commission saw a concept, but we're going to roll up our sleeves and look at the actual site plan. Very exciting project. And the second is the DDA landscape project. So the Planning Commission was also shown a concept of that. So it was very important for both projects to keep the Planning Commission in the loop and solicit your feedback. I was on the committee for the DDA landscaping, and we did definitely listen to the Planning Commission, some of the concerns, and you'll hear that next Tuesday.
Thank you. Yes, Ms.
So are
Barakas.
they presenting something that we're voting on, or it's just another feedback session?
It'll be feedback, informal feedback on the DDA landscaping, and a recommendation of approval for City Council for the pavilion and ice skating rink.
Okay.
All right. Mr. Rahman.
I'm all set, thank you.
Mr. Tagle. Ms. Dufresne.
Nothing, thank you.
Mr. Savidan.
Also had the opportunity to attend the MAP conference. It was really nice to attend in person because the last two conferences have been remote, and I just don't learn that way. So it was way more effective. I got to know I've known Mr. Kren a long time. I got to know him even a little bit better, and I got to know Mr. Buechner better. And fun fact, his dad jokes are worse than mine. And I didn't know if that was possible, but he's got some really bad but really good dad jokes.
Okay, we'll have to ask him after the session's over. So. And the only thing I wanted to mention is thank Ms. Dufresne for sending me the bylaws for the Planning Commission. I think sometime after the first of the year, if we could have one of our special study sessions and cover several topics, like reacquainted with some of the legal rules that we have to deal with, and maybe look at the bylaws and maybe some revisions in there. So.
Last time we looked at the bylaws, so that's.
I think it's been like 8 years or something like that. So yeah, I can make a note. I can share those with everybody, and everyone can look at them and then see if they need a refresh for some reason. It's always good to look at them again.
Mr. Lambert, are you talking something more even comprehensive than that in terms of like a legal primer again?
Just a legal primer to go along with some other topics. I know there was a question, some of the commissioners had said, maybe we needed time to look at the economy of Troy and how that affects development was one of the topics that was suggested. So we'll give Mr. Savidan lots of things to schedule for the next year or so. Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, we can sit down over a coffee sometime, and we can talk about topics that we could take an informal poll. You know, we could certainly do that.
Good, great, thank you. And with that, we are adjourned. All right.